Welcome to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today because, well, we're looking at something totally unique. We aren't just examining a piece of history or some standard article here. No, we're actually decoding a fascinating, highly structured blueprint for an AI-generated dark historical documentary. The source document we're unpacking today is this meticulously crafted 30-part script titled The Dark History of a King, the King Who Lost Everything. It's entirely designed to create a deeply immersive, atmospheric, and just ultimately tragic narrative about absolute power and its inevitable collapse. So get ready because we're going to see exactly how a cinematic tragedy is built right from the ground up.
Okay, let's dive into this because the phrase, power fades, history remains, is literally the beating heart of our entire explainer. This is the haunting final line that the source document explicitly commands to be shown at the very end of the narrative, overlaying this epic sunset shot of a ruined kingdom. It frames absolutely everything we're about to decode. It tells us right out of the gate that this isn't some story of a victorious conqueror who reigns forever. No, this is a story about the temporary nature of human ambition. It asks us to view the king's entire journey not as a triumph, but really just as a fleeting moment in the vast, unforgiving sweep of time. Section 1. Anatomy of a Tragic Script. Before we get into the story itself, we really have to look at the fascinating structure of the source material. This document is quite literally a set of exact instructions, an AI prompt blueprint designed specifically to generate a dark, cinematic, historical documentary. And the precision of that blueprint? Well, it all comes down to the number 30. The entire narrative is broken down into exactly 30 prompts. In fact, the document opens with a note in Hindi and Urdu reading, "Ya 5 minute ki video ke liye prompt hai," meaning this is a prompt for a 5-minute video. The instructions specify that each part is meant to generate precisely 10 seconds of output using cutting-edge AI generation tools, things like Grok, Runway, or Pika. So if you multiply 30 prompts by 10 seconds, boom, you get exactly the 5-minute story the creator intended. It's just a brilliant example of how complex emotional storytelling is being reverse-engineered into these bite-sized, programmable prompts that AI can easily understand and visualize. Section 2, The Ambitious Prince's Rise. Our journey starts with parts 1 through 5, setting up this grim, dark medieval kingdom. Out of this foggy world, a young prince emerges, learning sword fighting and staring at maps by candlelight, his eyes just full of ambition to build an empire. And this brilliantly illustrates the tragic arc of our explainer. We see this incredibly stark contrast. On one hand, you've got that vibrant, ambitious young prince preparing to build his empire. On the other, the devastating reality of his future, an old, sad king walking away all alone from an abandoned, dusty throne room. By placing these two specific prompts side by side, we see the full, devastating cost of his ambition. It really begs the question, how on earth do we get from the hopeful prince to the shattered old man? Section 3. Burdens, War, and Cruelty. The shift from hope to despair begins the very moment the crown touches his head. Right from the start, despite the cheering crowds at his crown ceremony, dark shadows are looming behind him, and the heavy weight of ruling immediately starts crushing his morality. Let's see how quickly this tension builds, moving from part 8 to 11. We go from a dramatic scene where the shocked king discovers a secret letter of rebellion straight into an epic, cinematic medieval war right outside the castle walls under a stormy sky. And then, finally, we're dropped right into the devastating aftermath, with the king walking through a destroyed battlefield among his fallen soldiers. The escalation here is brutally fast, from a whispered secret straight into mass devastation. The trauma of that war fundamentally breaks the king's mind. Compounding pressures drive him toward paranoia and anger. Think about it. You've got royal advisors secretly whispering in low light, suffering villagers being absolutely crushed under heavy taxes, and then the ultimate hidden dagger, the queen herself secretly meeting with an enemy leader. It's just a recipe for total disaster. Section 4. Betrayal and the Rebellion. The external wars were one thing, but finding physical evidence of his queen's betrayal in part 15, that completely shatters his world. This broken heart acts as the ultimate catalyst that pushes him right past the point of no return. The profound emotional isolation here is just striking. The physical space of the throne room, once grand and full of cheering people, is now entirely empty, perfectly reflecting his paranoid mental state. By pushing absolutely everyone away, he has inadvertently stripped himself of all his defenses. He's left completely vulnerable. And while he sits alone in the quiet dark, his people are secretly plotting underground, their faces lit by the glow of torches, actively planning his demise. Here's the tactical sequence of the castle's fall, laid out step by step in the prompts. First, the underground rebels finalize their plans. Then, an intense action scene erupts as rebels breach the castle at night, taking the guards completely by surprise. Finally, we reach the climax. The king wakes up to the attack. He dons his armor and prepares for a final, doomed fight, engaging in a dramatic sword battle against the rebels right in the castle hallway. But honestly, despite his armor and his sword, he's just one lonely man going up against a massive tide of revolution. Section 5. Fading into historical ruin. The frantic action stops, taking on a much slower, more reflective tone. The defeated king stands alone in his broken castle, and in a highly symbolic moment, the people physically strip him of his crown, the ultimate symbol of his lost power. The imagery dictated for the end of his life in parts 25 and 26 is incredibly intimate and sorrowful. We see the old king writing his final words in a diary, illuminated by a candle that is almost finished, which is a really powerful metaphor for his fading life. He's instructed to have a regretful expression as he stares at old paintings of his youth. He is trapped with nothing but the memory of that ambitious young prince we saw at the very beginning of this explainer. So, the crucial point is, it all comes down to hubris, the fatal pride that leads to a downfall. The creator of this AI blueprint explicitly wrote this universal theme into the climax. In part 27, the king realizes his biggest enemy was actually his own pride. His cruelty, his isolation, his relentless ambition to hold absolute power, that was the very mechanism of his destruction. Which leaves us with this final, profound question. If absolute power breeds the pride that destroys it, what is the true cost of building an empire? The source document ends with parts 28 through 30, showing nature peacefully taking over the ruined castle years later, and an ancient book turning its pages to fade the king's story into mystery. As the sun sets on the ruined kingdom in the final epic shot, we are reminded of that opening quote. The king is gone, his empire is dust, but the lesson remains. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through the architecture of a tragic AI narrative right here on The Explainer.